Great news. Side Retired is now partnered with SeatGeek. For all ticketing needs, go to SeatGeek.com and use promo code SideRetiredPod, all capitals, for $20 off your first order. We've got you covered from all things ranging from sporting events to concerts, including the New York Mets, New York Yankees, and Harry Styles. Yes, this means we're officially taking you out to the ballgame. And now for today's episode of Side Retired Podcast. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Side Retired, the MLB podcast. It is Dylan joined alongside Jack. Today's episode basically just going to be a Joe Maddon instant reaction that the Angels manager has been fired, coming on the heels of their 12-game losing streak that is still ongoing. This is the second prominent Joe manager that we've seen fired in the last week, with Joe Girardi being out of Philly, as well as the fact that Joe Maddon is now out of LA. We'll also get you some breaking news regarding Hector Neris, which will happen later on in this episode. But before we get into that, Jack, I know you're a little happy today. We just finished up the Side Retired wiffle ball game challenge, and you kind of struck me out to end the game with the bases loaded.
Yeah, I think we had an overall great team performance. I won't comment on the matter. We're going to move on to the next game, the repeat. We'll be looking to continue success there. Nothing more to be said on the matter. But,
and again,
Joe Maddon today. The Angels, they've lost 12 games in a row, including heartbreakers to the Phillies. They've had very rough stretch. When Mike Trout is in the worst slump of his career, there's not really, for a team that's so reliant on his success, that, when he's not going and he's, not necessarily, not even being Mike Trout, but he's 0 for close to his, I think he went 0 for 30 at one point. So yeah, you're not going to win many ball games when you're like that. So the blame that all on Joe Maddon, I wouldn't necessarily say is fair. You can't really make him the scapegoat or the hero if they're playing, like they were the first half of the season. So, it's a tough situation to be in. I think I understand it more so than the firing of Joe Girardi, just because the Angels have had expectations like these, going into the season, and they were there. They had, I believe, the 8th best record in MLB, and now they're not even in the playoff picture, or they're not in the current playoff spot. So I wouldn't overreact much into this. The Angels, Mike Trout's going to be hitting again. Ohtani's going to continue. Sandoval has been pitching very well for them. And while there aren't a surplus of arms available at the deadline, they certainly can make a play if they're in playoff contention. And it seems like the Red Sox, who are currently hot, they have a series against them. So if they want to make up some ground and stay close within the playoff picture and go out and deal for a Frankie Montas or Luis Castillo, other A+ starting pitchers are going to be available for them.
I think with the Angels, they're not as good as they were in April when they were arguing and battling with the Mets and Dodgers and Yankees for the best record in baseball, but they're definitely not also this 12-game losing streak. I think you're going to find them in that happy middle ground, maybe win around 83, 84 games at the end of the year, which is definitely a step up from where they've been. But in general, the Angels' problem remains their pitching. They did sign Noah Syndergaard and Michael Lorenzen, and Syndergaard has been very up and down this season. His overall numbers aren't as great as you'd want them to be, but he's had flashes where he's absolutely dominant. And then he had that clunker at Yankee Stadium a couple of days ago where he gave up, what was it?
Ohtani?
Syndergaard.
Oh, Syndergaard? Yeah, that was – he went 3 or 4 innings.
3 innings with 6 or 7 runs. Yeah, so it starts like that, which will inflate Syndergaard's ERA. Syndergaard has been a really solid starting pitcher for them. Ohtani's Ohtani. And then I think Michael Lorenzen and Patrick Sandoval have been solid middle-of-the-rotation guys. But in general, that's not a staff that's going to carry you, especially when their offense has struggled a little bit. We've seen Justin Upton was already released. Jared Walsh is very hit or miss. David Fletcher's missed the whole year with an injury. So in general, the Angels have a lot of question marks. And I guess the main question is probably, is this the right move? Joe Maddon's a very experienced manager, but did something have to be done, especially when you've lost 12 games in a row, to shake up the clubhouse?
Yeah, I think, Phil Nevin as their new interim manager, I don't know, from a managerial perspective, how many more games you're going to win with Phil Nevin managing your team versus Joe Maddon, who's won a World Series. So the argument in terms of him firing is going to have a direct correlation to better play. I wouldn't really say it's more so how we're not going to stand for this subpar play anymore. The GM who brought him in is no longer there. His contract expires anyway. Let's try to light a fire under these guys. And hopefully, Trout ends this 0 for streak, he maybe he'll go back to his first half of the season but it's just there's a lot of things going wrong for them right now that won't be the case for the entire year. It seems like the Mariners are a disappointing team, plus they have the Rangers and the Athletics in their division, so they have the games and the time to make up the ground. It's just a matter of how the team will respond to this kind of push by ownership.
And we did see the Phillies ended up taking the first 3 games after Joe Girardi was fired. Of course, you could also attribute that to the fact that they're facing the LA Angels. But it wouldn't surprise me. Joe Maddon, yes, he's out right now, but I don't think this is the last you're going to hear of Joe Maddon. He's a valued veteran manager experience. He took the Rays to the World Series. He won, obviously, the World Series with the Cubs. Obviously, not as much success here with the Angels as he would have hoped for, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see Joe Maddon pop up at least once more as a managerial candidate, probably after this season in the offseason. Can I make a bold prediction that he's the next Phillies manager?
Are we going to see musical chairs with managing? They just swap positions?
Ooh, I don't know. Joe Girardi could take a year off. I could definitely see him eyeing something else, go back to MLB Network, because he was really good at that when he was there.
He also doesn't seem like much of a West Coast guy. I think his family is more, located on the side, and they relocate, the other side of the country seems not in the cards for him.
Well, we have seen Maddon go from Tampa Bay to Chicago to LA. So it seems like where Maddon sees a high opportunity and a high risk, high reward type of place, Maddon could definitely find himself there. So I think Philly next offseason, and yes, of course, that's just us saying there's 2 managerial openings right now already, but I'm sure there will be a handful of others that get fired throughout the offseason and throughout the rest of this regular season. But we're not going to be woe is me for Joe Maddon. He will certainly land on his feet somewhere else in the upcoming future. The Angels, I think we're saying in general, yes, this is a rough stretch, but just get through it. Although, guess what? New York Mets are coming to town. It's not going to get much easier for them this weekend. And yes, it's time to officially take the Mets as legit and serious as one of those big bad teams coming to town. Unless there's anything else you want to add about the Angels, Jack. Nope. All right. The other thing that we did want to mention that is breaking news, Astros reliever Hector Neris, formerly known as a Philly, was suspended for 4 games for throwing at the head of Eugenio Suarez in last night's game. Neris has the option of appealing the suspension courtesy of John Heyman. Dusty Baker is also suspended for 1 night because of the intentional throwing. It doesn't appear as Dusty's going to appeal his. He'll just take that tonight and he'll be back in the dugout tomorrow. Neris with a 4-game suspension will probably appeal that and get it likely down to 2 to 3 games. But anything you want to say about that matters? That's a pretty straightforward story.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more for me to elaborate on. I think when we're talking about intentional throwing, I think recently there was one, Michael A. Taylor in the box, and it was bottom of the 9th, and there was a 2-run game. There's no reason for him to be being hit, and then the umpires immediately ejected without warning. So it doesn't. I don't know if this is apples to apples, but I don't think we can be overly skeptical. I think people are so very quick to assume that someone's intentional, when in reality guys try to pitch good hitters inside, and sometimes the ball gets loose, and especially in close games it's hard to evaluate. I mean, I'm not fully aware of all the context of the situation, but a 4-game suspension for a hit by pitch seems it's definitely a lot.
There is one other story that is breaking as of right now. Craig Mish, who's a great reporter for the Miami Marlins, he covers them for Herald Sports, is saying that the Miami Marlins had a 90-minute team meeting this morning called by Don Mattingly. He said things had to get out in the open, and it was not a rah-rah meeting. Many people spoke, said he would not be surprised if the team comes out flat today as a result of this meeting, and he would not disclose the image or discuss the meeting further. Sandy Alcantara said similar. He would not disclose details of the meeting, did say that their players are not always going to get along. He referred to a similar meeting when he was a younger player in the minor leaguers with the Cardinals. There's internal dispute among the players about some issue that appears not to be getting out as to what's actually occurring. There's also video on Craig Mish's Twitter account of Mattingly speaking and Alcantara speaking and all that stuff. So definitely make sure to go check that out, as Craig is a great follow for Marlins fans. But in general, I don't know. Things are seeming to fall apart in Miami. Maybe Don Mattingly's next up on the chopping block.
Yeah, I think I had this team squeaking in as a wild card spot just because of that pitching depth. And while they've had, they found it with Pablo Lopez and Sandy Alcantara, and who's not being talked about enough as a potential Cy Young candidate this year. They're currently 13 and a half games out of first place. The Mets are rolling away with the division, and the wild card, there's just so many good teams ahead of them. The Pittsburgh Pirates currently have a better record than the Arizona Diamondbacks, so it seems like the playoffs are out of reach for them.
And the final mistweet is to hear Mattingly say he didn't know one way or another if the issue is resolved after a 90-minute meeting is concerning. From my experience, team meetings are usually held usually to team bond, and it does not sound like that happened today. So in general, peril in Miami, peril in Los Angeles, Phillies may be on the uprise. Jack and I will be back tomorrow. We have a very special guest coming on. He is Derek Marquez, who is a certified MLB agent for player representatives. So definitely going to be worth checking that episode out. So until the next time, for James, Jack, and Dylan, the side is retired.